Hello, my name is Jorb. I love gear, and today we're talking about this, the Game Changer Audio Plasma Voice. It is a complete synth voice in 16 HP for your rack that generates its sounds with this xenon tube. It lights up like that bridge between pod racer engines, this bright purple whenever it's making a sound. Crazy cool, crazy interesting. If you know Game Changer, the company Game Changer, they do all sorts of unconventional things to generate sound. This could just be that. It could just be, here's an oscillator that works with this unconventional method of generating sound, and it would be an interesting module. But it doesn't just stop there. There's control and interface choices that make this a really complete, really capable voice. And even if you turn your nose up at purple lightning, why would you do that? I think there's a lot to appreciate here. That's all I got to say. I'm going to step through how to use it, how to control it. I'm going to give you a couple examples at the end. This video is sponsored, so thank you, Game Changer. Subscribe if you aren't yet. Shout out my patrons, and let's get started. Here we are on the table with the Plasma Voice. I'm controlling it with my APC Live 2, just CV and gate out. The Plasma Voice is going through the O tool, so we can see it. And then out of that is going through an effects section. The only thing that's turned up right now is a little bit of delay. I guess I'll zoom out and show you. So there's everything. System 8860, which is not filtering. A filter that's not filtering. WD Orion, a phaser that's not phasing. Bizarre Jezebel Athra. Delay that I'll have on just a little bit, and then the del verb, mostly for reverb. But that's not important right now. We're zoomed in on the Plasma Voice so we can show you how it works and what you get control over. There is a lot. So to sort of begin somewhere, you'll see we have banks and sounds. Each is a group of 7. So 7 sounds and 7 banks, that's 49. And each of these banks, represented up here, bass, lead, pluck, drum, metal, static, and spark. Each of these sounds represent a digital sample or a digital waveform that's modulating this plasma tube. And if I change sounds, its harmonics are different, its pitch is different, its envelope over time is different. It's a totally different sound. I really like that one. And we can modify that with parameters down here. Coarse pitch, which is an offset to whatever we're adding in. We have modulation, which is bipolar. Up is pitch, down is something else, which changes per sound. Harmonics. Flux. And watch, you can see we're actually changing the way the plasma tube is reacting. And then there's an analog filter and an analog VCA, but we can control this analog filter here. It's neutral in the middle. You're not filtering at all. From the middle down to the bottom is just an offset of the cutoff. And up is an envelope. Which is affected by this time knob. But also this time is how long from any trigger that your noise will ring out. Okay? Okay, we're starting pretty simple. All of these are attenuverters to modulate these parameters, which is awesome. So anything I just showed you, time, mod, harmonics, flux, or filter, you can modulate that with any external source. Might as well show you. So here's LFO from the function junction out into, let's do harmonics. That'll be really easy to hear. And we'll turn the modulation all the way up. You can already see the lights moving. Let's turn the time up so I can hold it. And you can offset that value and sort of tame the modulation. It can be positive or negative. It takes bipolar voltage. Sounds great, but we can do that for any of these. And we have a multi-CV, so we have a second jack effectively for any of these. Okay, two more things on the panel I haven't mentioned. There's this manual trigger, which is cool for your RX setups, and you can see what a trigger would do before you've patched one in or manually do that. And on this side, it's called a clutch. So if I set up a sequence, that'll be this clutch. If I hold this and then make a bunch of parameter changes, those parameters won't actually change. They won't be modified until I let go clutch. I think that's super slick. I've never seen that on anything. It makes so much sense and is sort of the first bullet point in me, and is the first thing that sort of makes it click that, okay, this isn't just the interesting sound generation. This clearly understands how it's going to be used and has a lot of decisions made in service of that. I think that clutch is awesome. I want to see that clutch as part of like a modulation bus module. I think that's so clever. Anyway, I'm showing you that so I can show you the way you get to settings. You press trigger and clutch at the same time, and you see we have 7 banks of settings. The first 4 are represented on the bottom here. Triggering, accent, multi-CV, and MIDI. MIDI self-explanatory, but we'll start with triggering. So you see, as I click in this encoder, I go between 3 options. The top, this group of 5, and then this group of 2. The top is what setting we're changing, so we're going to stay there. First one is trigger mode, and this might seem a little deep, but it totally fundamentally changes the way you get to interact with this, so I think it's worth mentioning that, like, this stuff is that deep, this stuff is that important. If we're on the bank here, we're changing settings, like I said. Here, we're changing options. There's actually a third one for trigger. We won't worry about that right now. Right now we're on trigger. If I press a note, it'll run that sample once. It's like a one-shot, right? If I move to the next gate, I can hold that as long as I want. And when I let go, it's like a release stage. And to get out of this, you press this Alt button. So let's get a different. So now time is like a release. Instead of just being the length of our entire one through the trigger. This can also be, let's say, loop. Where it will repeatedly run through that trigger. That goes all the way into audio rates. Our fourth one, it works like an oscillator, where now our time controls our VCA. So I could run our gate out to external envelopes and control that over time. I could go on and on. I'm going to go back to the gated one, and I'll leave it there for now. But just to show you right from the get-go, hey, there's tons of settings that will fundamentally change the way that you get to interact with this. Okay, that's a little out of order, but I always go out of order, don't I? That's the way I like to do it. So still on the thread of, showing you what is available, these first 3 banks, bass, lead, and pluck, those are the most still feel like, oh, this is just a gnarly oscillator. And there's tons of parameters. Even, again, I'm not modulating anything myself. There's so much diversity in these individual sounds. in pluck, it honestly kind of feels like I should go back to one-shots. Where this time is not just the envelope of the filter, it's the envelope of some of the other stuff that's changing in this voice. And I guess this is probably also a good time to show you. You have alt functions underneath each of these faders. That's what's printed in red. I don't know how visible that is, but the easiest one to hear, for example, is the filter's resonance. So if I hold alt and bring this all the way up, and then our filter here. We have independent control of the resonance. Let's bring it all the way down now. You can also attenuate your multi-CV. For pitch, it's fine-tune, but then for time, modulation, and harmonics, they affect the accents, and we'll get to accents shortly. Anyway, back to these sounds. I'm going to leave it on lead. And I'm going to go back to our gated menu option. I'm into that. The only other thing I think I haven't mentioned on the panel, there's a drive section, which is after the oscillator but before the filter, and then an EQ at the end. The bass and the treble are detented in the middle, so it's cut to the left and boost to the right. Pretty flexible. I find myself wanting to just turn up the drive in the bass. But I find that you lose some of the staticky stuff that like really makes this sound unique. So this is more or less where I've been leaving it, with modifications to drive depending on the rest of the sound. Anyway, as I keep going through sounds, I don't like to just show you everything, but these first three are sort of expected, gnarly oscillator things, right? This drum setting is a lot of stuff that is really just percussive. And is where it sort of becomes clear to me that a really strong Eurorack sequencer paired with this could be insanely cool. A PAMS or a Metropolix. In this drum setting, if you send this MIDI channel 10, and it works on most MIDI channels normally, but channel 10 is percussion mapping, so different notes are actually different sounds. I think I have a short example of that. The sound might be bad, but different notes trigger different sounds. So you can have this be a sort of, multi-percussion voice. Again, just another really flexible, cool thing you could do. I keep getting distracted, but those first three banks are sort of typically, oscillatory, synth voicey things. Even if they are bold and brash, they work more or less the way you expect them. You know what I mean? You could use those for melodic or bass elements, let's say. Drum is really percussive stuff. But the last three, metal, static, and spark, let things sort of go wild. And again, you can see the plasma tube reacting. So those parameters are actually changing this high voltage tube of gas, and that's what we're hearing. I think that's sick. But yeah, here's the first sound in metal. Crazy, bold. Crazy, bold. Crazy, bold. I think you get the point. Static. Static sounds like glitch elements. That sounds like low pulse width. You kind of get what I'm showing you? These are more outlandish, and Spark is a lot of the same. And Spark is a lot of the same. I think modulated, those can be really, really strong. Those back three are the Sarah Bell Reed section. I'm into the first three. I like bold, you know, sort of clangorous mono sounds, and I find more use for it in what I'm doing than the experimental stuff. But it's all here. And certainly the way you get to have access to it, the way you get to modulate it, there really is a lot you could do. Great. What else can I show you? I haven't shown you accents yet. So I'm going to give you a quick primer, and then I'm going to give you some specific examples of what to do with it. The accent parameter can be a lot of different things, and we're going to go back into settings to get to it. I believe that will be the second one here. So, yep, we can see it printed on the bottom. Accent, duck, starve, CV freeze, jump, reverse, and burst. I'm not going to show you all of them, and I am going to do it in a bit of a silly way just to demonstrate. I'm using this Winterbloom Big Honkin' Button. I'm using it just as a trigger out. I love this module. It's actually come in handy so often. But for the accents on my torn up manual here, I'm actually just going to start with starve. So that's 2 and then 3. So if I hold a note and press the button, you can hear it go all the way out. What starve is doing is reducing the voltage to our plasma tube here. I'll just read it out of the manual here. Starve triggers plasma tube driver ducking envelope. But I don't want it to just cut off abruptly like that, but I need to get to accent level here. There we go, and find that exact spot, and then we can do accent time and accent shape, and it's sort of a ducking envelope that changes the voltage of this. Watch that react. I hope that's showing up well on camera. So if I just set up an ARP here. I can use that as a sort of an accent, or in this place it's almost like a ducking. In some way, that's our only access to control certain things, certainly directly. That's our only way to starve the tube driver. We can use it to reverse the sound, which actually, I'll show you that one too. That's 2-6, right? 2-6, yep. I need to find a good example. Probably one of the plucks. So here on one of the plucks, just another quick example, I have the accent set up right now to do reverse. So when I hit a normal trigger, it's like a decay envelope. And here, with the accent envelope, it rises. There's an attack to it. It's reversed. And that time will increase our attack. So in some ways, this accent parameter is your only way to get to some of the modulations. And in others, it's like sort of step modifiers, like burst, CV freeze, duck, and accent. So super, super powerful. That's about the Jorb view, right? Here's the thing. This is how you use it. This is what I think it's good for. Watch me turn knobs, have close-up detail of the panel. That's the Jorb view part of this. Next, I'm going to take a note from some of the people I look up to who do Eurorack content. They always show super sick examples of a bunch of things working together. and then sort of explain what it is you're hearing. And it doesn't matter if you know everything about that filter, that delay, blah, blah, blah. So I'm going to set this up in some sort of a complicated setup, and we'll come back and I'll explain it all. How's that sound? Cool? Cool. With that setup, something I should mention before I get too lost in anything, I'm using the Nano Kaisha 104. Sorry, the label's covered by my makeshift stand here. Just a clamp to prop this up at an angle. But it has this whole top row of utilities. I use these balance inputs as attenuators. I use these buffered multiples all the time. This precision adder for oscillator voltage is so helpful. Just having two simple LFOs, sample and hold, a mixer and output stage. I think this is all the utilities I really would need. It lets me put mostly interesting stuff in the case, and the utilities are already taken care of. I don't have to worry about it. Where are they going to go? Do I have space? All that. And it makes this 104 really stretch a lot more. So you could get an IntelliGel 1U case, or, I guess, what's that, 4U case? But black would be more expensive than this without any modules in it. So there's my case. I think the Kaisha 104 is fantastic. Okay, anyway, most of the really cool stuff is taking advantage of two slick things here in the Plasma Voice. First, the multi-CV can change your path. So every time I trigger a note here, see those LEDs are changing? I'm sure you can hear. The sound is changing. I'm triggering it with sample and hold that I'm triggering with the same trigger that triggers the sound. The same key press says, okay, grab a new random value from the noise here. So I guess the full path on that, trigger out of the MPC, that's getting multed into this trigger and this envelope generator for function junction. And it's triggering the sample and hold, which is sampling noise, just white noise. So every time I hit a key, I get a random sound. That's the first thing, and that's the first thing, and if I just play it quick, that's what you're hearing. And also, I'm using the big honking button with the accent. It's set to burst. I'm using it sort of as a ratchet that I'm manually controlling with the big honking button. So if I just press it while nothing's playing, that's how fast it goes. And the whole time I was hitting it in time, more or less the same points. I didn't always nail it, but you get the point. You get the point. I'm using that as a sort of manual ratchet. I could be triggering that from an additional CV out of the MPC, or if I had any other Eurorack sequencer. You know what I mean? I wouldn't have to be doing that manually. I think, one, that gave my left hand something to do in this more or less pre-recorded performance. And if you see it, you'll notice that, oh, that's not coming from the MPC, it's not coming from the sequencer. You can tell that I'm manually triggering it. Beyond those two things, which that really is like the core of this and why this is cool, I think. Patches are slightly different now. I was manually changing pitch on the Navigator. I don't know if that's in the final cut or not. Or I was doing it on the triplet. I would be switching this on and off, or I'd be sliding this on and off, just to give a pitch offset here. And that, like I said, that same trigger is triggering this envelope into our 860 filter. Along with, at some points, filter settings on the Plasma Voice. After that, WD Orion, Phaser, Bizarre Jezebel, Athra, and then, if you can't see it, the Delverb for more space. But that's really it. Those are the two big things. The big things are using that burst as a manual ratchet and multi-CV to change the patches. yeah, I wanted to highlight that, the multi-CV and the accent. On to the next one. Alrighty. So I got like 10 minutes of stuff. I don't know how much of it I'm going to use. But, hang on, can't do two things at once. But the big point I was trying to make is this is good for sort of like sci-fi stingers. You know what I mean? Not being a lead melodic part, just adding so much texture to other stuff. So the big core of this patch right now, and I'll turn the delay and reverb way, way, way down, is this Dixie 2 Plus from IntelliGel and her Plasma Voice through this, the STG SoundLabs.slc. It's sort of an audio rate crossfade, so you're crossfading between individual waves. How's that? That's a lot better. The SLC is sort of an audio rate crossfade, but the idea is you're blending partial sections of individual waves. So here in the Pittsburgh O copy, which is just such a simple mixer, I really love it. If I have just this first input on, that is our slice output of the .slc. So if I just play one note, I was modulating it, but I'll do it manually right now. It lets me fade between, on the left, this A input, so the shark tooth from the Dixie 2 Plus. And if I crossfade all the way to the right, then all the way to the right is all the Plasma Voice. And in the middle, especially because they aren't exactly in tune, I think that's a lot of interesting movement. I was doing that with an envelope. I was modulating it from here, this bottom envelope of the Roland 540. So if we watch the O'Toole, you'll see it blend from that shark tooth into our Plasma Voice and back. So if I bring down the filter, that's the DSM-01 Curtis filter. You see that? That's the DSM-01. Framing this is going to be so hard. That's the DSM-01 Curtis filter that I'm modulating with the top envelope of the 540. Along with this whole mix is going through the VCA here. So it sort of changes over time. It's moving. That could be an LFO, or I guess I could just cycle here on the envelope to modulate between those. On this second channel here, it's just the sub oscillator from the Dixie. But depending on what take I use, you'll hear the sub-oscillator from the Dixie combined with the output of the SLC, or just the output of the SLC. The STG Soundlabs Slicer. But I like that sort of movement, that sort of mixing. So that's the point I'm trying to make. This, as a second oscillator, this mixed in with something else, can sound really, really great. And the sort of slower, ambient, textural stuff is sort of an attempt to show you that even though I think of this being, you know, clangorous and bold and aggressive and loud, if you dial some things back, it can be like sort of fascinating textural stuff. With just a little bit of restraint. I think it becomes such a sort of fascinating textural element. And you know, I think I'm going to stop there. I could do more. The video would be longer, and I would say the same things over again, and I'd run out of tricks. So there you go. That's all I got. My name's Jorb. I love gear. Hope you learned something. Hope you buy one of these. Thanks for watching. Cheers and so long.